So those figures that you've lovingly painted and push around the tabletop, do you ever wonder where they come from? Who thinks them up, how they're designed, how they're manufactured and made? Well, today we're going to find out, because I fired up the Dragon Wagon and we're taking a trip across the border into Cambridgeshire to visit Battlezone Miniatures. Hop in. So here we are, just outside of Royston in South Cambridgeshire at the HQ of Battlezone Miniatures.
That's right.
And I'm here to chat to Steve Renwick. Hey Steve, how you doing?
Not today.
So I thought before we get started in what goes on here, perhaps you could let us know how you got into the hobby.
Okay. We basically was running a Warhammer club with a group of lads and making scenery, and decided to, like, someone come and join the club who said you could sell this, so we started selling it. We started off by making movement trays, because Warhammer you needed a lot of movement trays,
right.
And you could only buy the little plastic ones.
Right.
So, as I said to you before, a big beastman army, 200 figures and movement trays to hold 25 figures in a pack. And so we did our first show was BritCon in 2004.
Oh right, quite a way back.
Yeah, we went up to BritCon and we did that, and they were sort of, wow, these resin trays are brilliant. And someone then said, well, could you make all of these for us? And in a couple of months, we had like 100 sizes. Wow. And then now our movement tray range is, I think we've got 186 different shapes and sizes, all in resin.
That's quite a range, isn't it? Because I suppose pretty much every game has different basing.
Yeah.
Isn't it, really? When you even in the same scale, you switch between things.
And what happens is someone will message in and say, "Can we've just done one, 150 by 80. It's the size that we've never stocked. We've had 150 by 75,
right,
which is a standard Warhammer size.
Yeah.
We've had 160 by 80, but no one wanted 150 by 80. So modify one of the trays, create it for that customer, and then goes on our list, because once you've got the master done and you've got the mould.
Once you've got that mould, then it's
you can recast the mould. The moulds break down, but you can recast them.
Yeah.
Again, and then so that size then sticks, and then you carry on, and someone will come on the website and order it again, and we've just grown the business organically like that.
Nice.
On the movement tray side. Yeah. It's not so popular now, obviously, but with movement trays and the lack of those big Warhammer style games of blocks of regiments, that was the thing. Warhammer's more.
Seems that games have moved a lot more towards skirmish, the sort of game you can play in a couple of hours, kind of thing. Yeah.
But I mean, we've got a few customers that have historical armies, massive, big Napoleonic armies, and over the years working with those customers, we've produced sizes for them, and they've bought hundreds of movement trays for their massive
for those
Napoleonic armies, which are all regiments. And
I still think it's nice to see a table with massive figures, isn't it?
Yeah.
And were you into tabletop much before that, or you say you're into the sort of Second World War stuff?
No, I was a member of MAFA, the Miniature Armoured Fighting Vehicles Association, making airfix vehicles and Tamaya, and worked along with that. Did a few national shows with them, but not really doing anything. It was just a hobby, but I've always looked at that side of it for wargaming, but there wasn't a way of getting into Second World War wargaming in the same way where I was in Royston. So when Warhammer come along, it was like, I really, this group of young lads asked me to be the adult to run it, and then I thought, well, if I'm going to run it, I might as well play it, and then got my first Warhammer army, which is Battalion army.
Right.
And just loved it, just loved playing it for a while. And so at one stage we had 60 members of the club in Royston.
Oh wow.
We were called the Rapturous Standard, which is one of the Chaos Warhammer banners. We got t-shirts, went off and did tournaments, and
brilliant.
Did all sorts of stuff like that. But then you start making stuff for your business, and then your hobby seems to stop when it becomes a business.
It's a difficult line sometimes, isn't it? Because I mean, in one of my other jobs, my hobby is also a business, and it is separating the two can be a bit difficult.
You find you don't play so much, and you're making you're making to sell rather than making for your own enjoyment. But it's still a passion, and you meet a lot of good people. You meet a few bad people as well over the years. But yeah, so that's how we start. We set the company up in 2002.
Right.
Didn't do anything for 2 years. 2004 was our first show, and we've been regularly on the War Game trade show.
So you do a lot of shows.
We do about 8 now, 8 to 10. We have done more, and we've had a period where we've done a lot less.
Yeah.
Because this isn't the main business. This is just a hobby business.
Right. Sure.
So, and with each time we've taken a new challenge on, we've had to evolve, change our making side of it. When we originally started with the movement trays, we had a lot of bought-in scenery. That we got from suppliers, and you end up finding when you're buying retail, your margins are so much smaller.
It's got to be a big expense, isn't it?
And then you get stock left.
Yeah.
And so unless you get right at the forefront, so we were right at the forefront of a system called Platformer that Pocket Bomb were doing, and every set we bought we sold at a show. We would be cleaned out and people would be asking. Yeah. But within 6 months, every other trader that did retail had them. Then
you lose that little niche kind of thing.
You don't. You end up selling them. So.
And you got into making terrain as well. So was that like a sort of development of making terrain for yourself?
Yeah, we made it for the. We had a couple of young lads that were making it for the club, and they would. We would then look at ways that we could make scenery to go with, and we were making primarily fantasy sceneries, obelisks and way stones and walls and poles and skeletons and bones and stuff like that. And then we had an opportunity to buy the scenery side of Gladiator Games of Biggleswade.
Oh, right.
And so we bought that, and that come along with a completely different process of making scenery. It was all out of an expanding resin, polyurethane resin.
Right.
And it was a side that was unpainted and painted, and so we bought that and the presses, and then for a while we just carried that side of the business on. So we then had movement trays and scenery was our business, and it then become, you have to find time. Being a self-employed builder, you can take weeks off to prepare for a big show, make scenery. Mainly shows were bringing the money. We was a bit slow on the website side then. It wasn't really so well developed as websites are today. There was a stage where we were getting really close to thinking, maybe one of us needs to be full time.
Go full time.
But just things just take away, and
it's quite a commitment, isn't it? And plus, looking back, then none of us knew that the pandemic was going to happen and all that stuff. So
when this was going, this was like 2010. I had quite a bad spell of depression in about 20 years ago. So all about the same time the business was going. So it was really quite difficult to health-wise to take the leap. And maybe if I had done it, things would have been different. But I look at some of the other companies are doing really well what they've done, and then all the companies that have been and gone in the time that I've been around.
Well, I think that's the thing with that. We always notice the successes, and there's one very obvious one that's in every high street right at the moment, which we were speaking about a little bit. But then, how many other dozens,
Yeah.
And we were speaking earlier, I know from being in the music business, you always see the successful band or whatever. For every one of those, there's 50.
Yeah. Yeah.
So getting that balance is difficult.
Yeah.
And then how did you get from terrain into figures? Because I think it was at Leeds I bought some fantasy figures off you.
Yeah.
And you got quite a big range of those.
Yeah, we wanted playing Warhammer. We realised that the better market is figures,
right,
than scenery. Scenery is good, but you can only have so many trees, only so many rivers.
Yeah, and
so
you can
many
use
bridges.
scenery for every single game, right?
And if a new club starts up, buys a load of new scenery, it's happy days, and then it all dries up. And so we really felt like we wanted to go into making our own figures, designing and making.
Oh, right.
And so we got the opportunity to buy into a rule set called Armies of Acana.
Right.
And it was always marketed as an alternative to Warhammer. Really good game system. The community around it turned out to be a bit toxic in the end, but it was an opportunity, and they had a whole range of races, shall we say. So the lizard men were divided into 4 races. So you had Triosaurs, Ophidians, Amphibians, and you had Herosaurs. Right. So these were names that you could put a figure to. Right. And you weren't then copying another company.
Yeah, that's quite nice.
You could say, you could make your figures designed to how they played in the game.
Yeah.
So we started off with that. We started making the lizard men range. So we had the 3 types, and we've developed another one on from there. Did the Herosaur, and then we did some skeletons. So we thought, generic skeletons, they're all the same.
You can't go wrong with skeletons, can you?
But we wanted to do something a bit different. So we did the range. So we've got a skeleton rat man, a skeleton orc,
oh, nice,
an elf, a human, a dwarf, and then we did the mounts. So we've got a skeleton camel, a wolf, a boar. We've got a raptor, because you've got to have a raptor because it looks cool. So we've got a skeleton raptor and a horse. So we had this range, and then we had the main figures were unarmoured, but then we did a mounted set that were armoured, and we tweaked them to suit. And must admit, though it doesn't sell wonderfully, it's a really nice set. We really liked it. And then we were offered a selection of moulds that were originally Grenadier models.
Oh, right. Oh, Grenadier.
Barbarians that you bought at Leeds.
Right. Who were one of the big companies back in the day, with the original D&D and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the really strange thing was we were sold them by quite a reputable guy, not realising that there's like 4 different licenses out there, 4 different sets of manufacturers, and we'd never got the whole range. We only got a limited part of it. Right. And we paid good money for it as well. So we were a little bit disappointed, but it still sells really well. And the Barbarians you bought at Leeds are of that range. And then because the Armies of Acana went toxic, we thought we would try and create a game based on the world of Arcana. And we sort of like took it forward a bit and broke it up and created a storyline. And then we started making what I think is probably our best set of designs. But we were creating an industry, a world where each generic faction was a culture. Okay. So you had the barbarians, and then you had the Roman culture, and you had the medieval culture, and then you would have the Greek culture. And in amongst that, you would have figures that were neither good nor bad, and neither of one race. So so for example, the barbarian race, you had orcs, elves, humans, dwarfs, all in a barbarian format.
That's a nice take on it.
And you could mix them into your warband. So the warband game we were working on, you would have units of figures that could be all mixed races. So you could have orcs, dwarves and humans all fighting alongside each other, and we created proper men and women figures rather than the generic woman figure with all her boobs hanging out. Which is still a thing you see, right? Which is a bit, so our figures were designed that they would be logically, that's how a female fighter would dress, as opposed to for gratuitous sex reasons. And we wanted to promote that side, that this is from the ashes of a destroyed planet, and the cultures that arrive, that grow from it would generically grow.
Yeah.
And men and women would need to fight for survival.
Yeah.
Hence there'd be the same warband.
Well, it's a nice take because everyone does the orcs, elves, and they tend to be like the dwarves are a bit like Vikings kind of thing, and the elves are a bit like whatever. And so that mixing in that gives it a nice
and
nice
from my point of view, I really quite enjoyed with the small team of guys that we got to work out how to design a race, what it would be like. So we had to stop it after a while because it just wasn't taking off. The game system didn't take off.
Right.
We had to stop the adding to the figures.
Right.
But we were working on the Romans, and we had a storyline that it was mainly elf dominated in the higher echelons, but you would have legionnaires that were orcs, with instead of crossbows they had mini scorpion bolt throwers, that sort of thing, So it's really quite.
That's cool. So is that still available?
They never come out. We got the first, because obviously when now people are using 3D printers. We use a very good sculptor, a guy called Martin Baker, and so you would send him a design sizes. He would then make you a master.
Yeah.
Send it back, create one copy of it, then send it to him for modifying. And so when you pick the next unit to make, you've got to pick 4 or 5 figures.
Right.
£100 a figure.
Right. Wow.
And
so
then you can convert them down. You can have that figure changed multiple times.
Yeah.
Change the armament, change the arms, change the head. But initially you've still got to lay that money out.
Yeah.
And so each set we were making, we were looking at an expenditure of about £1,000 really for a set of 8 to 10 figures that you could then grow. So that's where we were with that. But we were, I suppose, the biggest problem in the industry, as is media and marketing.
Absolutely.
And if I'm really honest, we're not very good at it.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is. I think no one's any good for it because no one knows how it works. I keep calling them logarithms, algorithms and all this stuff, and you post this and you post that.
But if you're like the big companies like Warlord and Mantic, and you've got a big following of people, you can bring in a rule set. I'm quite fond of Two Fat Large's rule sets, and they just make rules, and they've got a really big community around them.
Yes.
And they all play test, and then so when the rules come out, but we were struggling with the fantasy side. I was struggling with the fantasy side, and my own personal battles. Became a Christian, so the fantasy side of it was sort of become a bit of a conflict area.
Was there? Yeah, because I've seen divided opinion on this. Because we know like Tolkien, for example, was quite a devout Catholic, but then I've spoken to other people who say dragons.
Yeah. I think it's more the magical power, and like when we did our rule set that we were saying there was not a good or an evil. I sort of struggle with gamers that set an evil force up.
Right.
And you think, well, do you really know what evil's like in the world? You probably wouldn't be playing.
Well, but then that brings us onto that wider thing, doesn't it? And there was someone put a YouTube clip up a little while back, or last year, about if you're doing World War II wargaming, someone has to be a Nazi. Kind of thing, which they sort of had a point, but it doesn't mean that you're a Nazi because you.
When I was modelling, I've got some really good friends who are Germans, and when they come over, they saw my Stug 3 with a swastika on the back, and he went bananas. And he said, "You can't have that." I said, "But it's an historical vehicle."
Yeah.
No, you can't have that symbol. That symbol.
It's banned in Germany, right?
Yeah,
they can't put them on the box art or anything.
I'll just put it to one side, out of the way for the moment. But on the sort of the scale where you're dealing with demons, undead, the devil, stuff like that. Being a Christian, it's an area of conflict. I'm a modern. I'm not an old-fashioned. I'm a more sort of born again.
Right.
And so it was creating too many problems for me. So my business partner Tom, he hasn't got a problem with it. So that side of it goes, and I'm not one of these sort of guys that says you can't do that because I disagree with you.
Yeah.
So we continued to sell the figures, but it came at a time in my life where I needed to draw a line underneath it.
Yeah.
And we went to, and a really interesting thing happened to us. We went to what was supposed to be the Derby show and it was in South Lincolnshire. It was a horrible show. Everyone was rammed into this hall. I mean, just the worst possible. You've gone from Donington Park, which is a massive venue, into a venue half the size, and given the traders even less space. So we had people walking through our selling area, thinking it was an aisle. We were that tight. Yeah. But I met a guy there called Paul from Early War Miniatures, and it just turned out that we'd been friends when we were 8.
Oh, right.
And then at 11 lost touch with each other.
Yeah.
And there he was, another trader.
Yeah.
And his business is all 20mm Second World War.
Ah, right.
So he was like, oh well, and at that time I sort of like set a little thing to myself. If this show goes a certain way, I'll carry on with the fantasy. If it doesn't go well, we're gonna shelve the rule system, and we won't make any more new fantasy figures. We'll stop. And it just turned out that the weekend went the way of stopping the fantasy. And it turned out really well, because Paul at the time only lived down the road near Stevenage.
Oh yeah.
So 20-minute journey.
Yeah.
And he rekindled the Second World War modelling for me. And I agreed to look for a new venture. We would start making Second World War Russians.
Okay. Yeah.
So we went to our sculptor. We had some figures made. We went to found a guy that used to be part of who still is part of the Maffa scene, who makes our masters for our vehicles. And then Paul eventually said, well, I've got all these Americans vehicles and stuff. I really don't know what. I don't think I'm going to ever get it out. Would you like to take them on? So I bought them off of him. So now we sell Soviet and American ranges.
And they'll cross over as well, because the Soviets are using the half tracks.
Yeah. Stuff. There's a good link over. But once again, there's another. It's a fourth process. so we've got 3 styles of resin that we use: movement trays, expanded resin for our scenery, and another resin that we use for our vehicles. Right. And between the thing I love about the business and hobby is with working with Paul, we've perfected our casting techniques. Right. So we're now producing single piece castings. So one of my latest vehicles is a KV2. Yeah. 5 pieces. And that's including the hatches and the machine guns.
Wow. So yeah, it'd be great if we could get onto that. If you could take us through the process of, we were talking about design. So when you do a design, do you draw that up yourself, or do you just have like an idea and then you give that to your sculptor?
So on the fantasy side and fantasy figures, and even for the historical figures, you have to give your sculptor an idea of what to make. So when you're looking at the fantasy side, we take a load of pictures of poses, and say we want a character in this pose.
Right.
And then he would look at it and say, well, I don't know if I can get that in one piece. So you have to say to them, this is what. Give them a drawing if you can, or photograph. Real life photographs work. So you would look online, find someone who's got the sort of same armour you want. Right. Say, can I have them in this armour? I want this style of helmet. Yeah. And we said we want elves with this helmet and humans with this helmet, and then leave him to have a bit of license to how he wants to make the other bits up. On the Second World War side of it, you work to scale drawings.
Yeah, because you've got a definite and do you get a thing where what is it my mate called them, like button counters or rivet counters, I think is the term. They didn't have those buttons in 1942. do you ever get any of that, or at that scale is it?
I used to get that in the modelling, but we're creating wargaming pieces. Yeah. So I was looking at a magazine I recently looked at, where a guy has put in tracks on that each track link is 9 pieces, and there's 80 track links of size. There's 1,440 pieces to make 2 sets of track link, whereas our model is 1 piece. Tracks, wheels, hull.
Because it's for gaming.
Yeah.
And I always think, like, I've done it before, I made dioramas, and I'm looking to do a specific unit, very specific. This is October, and it's the Battle of, I don't know, whatever, Kursk or something.
Yeah.
So you research. But for gaming, I don't want to be that specific, you know.
No.
It's
And the thing is, if you spent a lot of time making a model, and it's got very fine machine guns, and then you pick it up to move it,
yeah.
you know, it's so easy. Or when you pack it away,
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of times when we've got now a display case for shows where everything's glued in place.
Right.
But we would take them out and put them in display boxes, and then you'd knock a shield off, or you'd break a spear, and you just think, and you're forever touching them up and chipping them. So the wargaming figures have to be robust.
Yeah.
But there's limited availability, so where you haven't got you know, a more robust version, and there's the 3D prints are coming on for those, you have to go to the model kits, and some model kits, if you've got a very specific model, there's not a lot around, and you have to go with that. But the more parts in the model club that I used to go to, they would argue that it's not modelling if it's only 5 pieces.
Well, there is that. I mean, I bought some, you know, some armour, some Stugs and some Shermans, and they're like snap together kits, specifically for wargaming. Yeah. And they paint up nice, and from this distance they look fine. I'm sure if someone went up close, they'd say, "Oh, look, it's," but I don't care.
No. Well, when you think about painting them, when you paint your 28mm, the higher you get, the more shading, dry brushing, 6 colours for the face. When you get down to 20mm, 2 colours, you don't see past that.
Yeah. So do you do your own castings for?
Yeah, we do. I do. I'm basically the do everything really. Tom, my partner, is the IT guy of the two of us, and he manages the website and sorts out printing, and you know, because we produce our own labels and. So we basically
everything's in house basically.
Everything's in house.
It keeps your cost down, doesn't it? A lot when you do that, because you start it.
Yeah.
And is it this kind of stuff?
Yeah. So we've got the different processes. So we've got our metal casting and our centrifugal machine here, run off a compressor. Obviously that's where we do the spinning. And moulds are kept here. So obviously the various different moulds. So we've got our fancy moulds. So this is a mould, obviously, with the shields in. I make all the moulds as well.
Oh right.
So we start off. I've got one actually in there at the moment, but it's a bit difficult. So this is called a vulcanizer. So this is where you heat your silicon up and compress it to harden it.
Right.
So it starts off as a simple 2 pieces of silicon together. And then when it's put under pressure and heated, it turns it into a hard product.
Right.
And then you can cast off of it, spin your metal into it. So that's that process. This is our pressure chamber. So our vehicles, and will be some of our larger figures, they are pressurised.
Does look exactly like a pressure cooker.
It's actually used for painting. You put your paint in and pressurise it, and then you can paint spray. So these are the moulds that we have for our Second World War figures, vehicles. So in here is one of them iconic models. Vehicles from the Second World War that were completely useless but fascinated everybody, and just a huge monster of a vehicle. The T-35 multi-turreted model. Now in metal, we have this in metal, and it weighs 660 grams.
I was going to say it'd be a fair old weight.
And in this weighs just about 90 grams. So completely.
And you've got a nice lot of detail on there as well.
Yeah, so it's really come out well.
It's very crisp.
Yeah, you can see we have little feeds on the corners for the corners.
Yeah.
So the corners come out. But a one-piece casting, tracks, wheels. The turrets themselves are one-piece castings as well, but we do have metal barrels, because we do feel that metal barrels just give it a little bit more strength, and it's much neater. KV1, the mantling barrel. So each design we look at how we're going to change So we've got 5 turrets on here. The larger turret has its gun in place. The 2 smaller turrets, one's machine guns, one's 4.7mm machine gun. Both are metal barrels that add into the turret.
That makes the model stronger as well, I guess, because one thing I sometimes find with older resin on figures is they come through the post and the swords are broken off and that kind of stuff.
So with the metal barrel, if you happen to drop it or you rough handle it, you're likely to bend it, and it bends back okay.
Yeah.
If it's resin, you bend it, it breaks.
Yeah.
This is a set of dirt roads, and they go into a press, and the resin's poured in, and you have to put it under pressure, clamp it down, and the resin pushes out as it expands and creates the very lightweight rivers. So this is one of our lightweight.
Yeah, because you showed me that earlier, and I was surprised at just how light that is compared to like the movement trays of different type of resins. That's strong as well.
So this our smaller bridges we do in the same resin as the vehicles, but you can see they're still quite lightweight.
Yeah.
But just a slightly different process.
Yeah.
That's what we use. So they're those processes, and then lastly the simple fast cast version over here of our movement trays. So basically just a flat tray that you pour the resin in. This one needs a bit more into it, and you create a little reservoir where you.
And there we go.
There you go. So 5x4, 25mm. We actually did this for our rule system to allow you to put your 20mm base figures into a space that creates a 25mm gap. So this would be the same as 25mm bases for all those armies that you had at Warhammer that were 20mm, and suddenly no one uses 20mm bases anymore.
So I think it's fascinating to see that process, because we all get this stuff and we play with it, and there's often not much thought in how it gets from an idea to that, you know, what you have on the table. We've touched upon it a little bit as well, and the big change now, I mean, you must have seen a few changes anyway over the years, and I guess the biggest one is the 3D printing, right? So is that something you're going into, or does that affect what you do here, or are you not going to touch it?
I'd like to do it. The problem I have is we've already got 4 different casting processes for each of our products. I could get a printing press, printing machine in here. They've really come down. The company that we buy a resin from are selling a really good quality resin printer for not a lot of money. And we could get one and start printing. But for us, the scenery we manufacture has its own process. I've seen some of the small scale printed figures, and then I don't think they're quite there yet on quality. There's a lot of smooth rounded faces as opposed to sharp faces. I think in the bigger scales there's some really good 3D printing out there for the really, you know, exquisite pieces for the run and mill stuff. So there's not really in our process we could design a 28mm figure and print them off. When you've got them in the mould and you've done them that way, you can spin you know, figures out on the spinning machine quite quickly, whereas 3D prints take a long time.
It takes quite a time.
And I know like Games Workshop and other companies are using 3D prints to create a master. That's an option we could possibly do. So if we were going to, I've seen in the Second World War side of the business, quite a few guys are using 3D prints to produce a master that they're then turning into their process. So and there are guys that are selling, you know, especially buildings that have been 3D printed. And what did I see the other day? I saw a metal basket to fit on a tank in 1/48 scale that was 3D printed. And when you have to think about the process of making that metal basket, having it 3D printed seems a really good way of doing it, as opposed to etched. But for our processes, you know, with our figure production, we're metal guys.
Yeah.
You know, even the 20mm. I like, you know, Airfix figures are great. Well, they were great. They're pretty pants now when you look at them. But there's something about having metal figures.
Well, that's what drew me when, say, the Leeds show was, you know, there were some nice plastic figures there, and I've got a couple of the boxes of the plastic skeletons and all that, which, you know, but gluing them together was a pain because they're quite brittle resin. 3 of them broke during the process of doing that.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that took me back to metal figures, and they feel nice. You know, there's some heft.
Yeah. Yeah, and I there's just something about having metal figures, that just the weight of them. I mean, even in our obviously metal, that the vehicle range that we had are mainly ex Skytrix, and I've got loads of moulds up there that are, you know, you're creating this tank here in Skytrix, you know, would be 4 or 5 pieces, really weighing a lot in metal. Metal's quite expensive now. So to produce this in metal is almost prohibitive in the cost and the weight of posting it and carrying it around. 660 grams this model weighs in metal. But in resin, you know, it can be cast as one piece. It could be thrown around because it's really hard wearing.
And you've still got that level of detail.
You've got all the level of detail. If not, you get even more detail. You can get more detail in the resin casting. 3D printed. You know, you could 3D print this. 24 hours of it running away. But for us, it's not an option. I think the 3D, if your skill set, a lot of people get into scenery because it's a practical skill set and anybody can make a river or make a hill. When you get into figure productions, you need to have a really good sculptor. Then you need to know how to vulcanise your moulds to create your disc for spinning. And then in resin, when we first started, we were backing the wheels up, and now we do it in this version where we can create hollows all the way through. We're using different types of silicon. You know, we're working at the cutting edge of almost the level of casting quality that you see from the model market. Where they're really going into fine resin casting.
So that technology, although some people might see that as old technology now, but that is still developing. That is still. Because when you think back, you mentioned like Airfix kits and Tamo and all of that stuff. And I remember back in the day, you know, they were quite basic, weren't they? And we were saying earlier, now you buy a 1/35th Sherman, and you've got photo etch parts as a matter of course. So.
And track links where it's a kit in itself.
It's like a rubber band, isn't it? And you heat them.
To heat to go on.
So you had to heat them. You had enamel paints, and you had that glue. So I wonder where it all
white spirit for filling down. So no, I think that there's the 3Ds market is here to stay. For me, the process, it's not going to change how I do things. If anything, I'd use 3D to create, you know, maybe the masters.
Create master figures. Yeah, it sounds like a.
But the guys we use, the sculptor that I use, is very good at what he does. Builds up green stuff. Creates a, you know, it's built on wire as opposed to sculpted. And our draftsman that creates our vehicles, you know, he you know it's going to be accurate. And it's going to be done in a way that you can cast it. 3D printing, you can get a drawing, and the other thing that people are not talking about with the 3D printing, which what I worry about, is once you've done your design and it goes out there, anyone can copy it.
Well, you get into like this, like the whole AI thing and all that stuff as well, where you can knock up artwork now in 10 seconds on whatever program it is. But there's issues around that as well. And it's like anything digital, right? You can't, music, whatever it is, you can't control.
And the thing with the historical side, you can't copyright it. You know, a T35 is a T35.
Who's to say that is your design or something? Because it ain't, it's Mr. It's not Kalashnikov, but you know, whoever's design.
I mean, you can, if someone takes your product and then sells it as their own, puts it in, moulds it, because that's the pirating, counterfeiting problem,
right.
then you can go after that person, but you can't copyright a T35.
You can't say that's
You know, but if someone, you know, you know what you've got, and if someone's taken yours, or they've you hear it quite a bit on the Facebook manufacturers forum, where someone is selling, you've got a very niche range of figures, and someone's selling it and they haven't bought from you.
Right.
And then you know that person's copying. I mean, we don't get it so much with the Second World War, but the fantasy guys.
It's going to be right.
It's right from the fantasy guys, and you know, all you need is a vulcanizer, and you can cast metal. 3D printing's a bit more difficult.
Well, there's a lot of stuff being sold out of China and places, right? I mean, just when it comes to figures or T-shirts or almost anything, will be, you know.
An interesting story for you. When we were selling Platformer from Pocket Bond, which was this plastics thing that you made all these different structures out of pipe work and grid work for playing Necromunda.
Oh, right.
And it was called Platformer, no one was called Hexagon, and we were buying it from Pocket Bond, and they were buying it from Russia, and it turned out that Airfix had designed it for a game system, sold it to, got the Russians to produce it. The Russians had sold it to Pocket Bond under patent. They'd also sold it to iCore, who were doing Urban Mammoth at the time, and so Urban Mammoth was like, how have you got this? We bought it from Pocket Bond, and the Russians had sold it, and then the Airfix, like a year later, bought out their game for all this stuff that was already on the market. It was quite, so that was back.
It's a minefield.
15 years ago. I think.
Yeah. So to finish, then, have you got any plans or anything at the moment? You got any shows lined up in the near future?
We've got
new ranges?
February. There's 2 shows. We're going to Bournemouth. There's a really good show down in Bournemouth called Beachhead. And that's a massive gaming tournament down there.
Oh, right.
The gaming arena is bigger than the trade area.
Wow.
And Pete, there's a shop down there called Entoyment, and Pete from Entoyment, who runs that, puts on a really good weekend show. A lot of gamers, and board games available.
Yeah.
And it's for us. It's like it's a really good weekend. We go on a Friday and meet up with Paul from Early War Miniatures, and we play board games on Friday and Saturday night, as well as trading.
Nice.
And so it's a really good show.
Nice.
And really, I suppose from there on, I'm trying to get stuff ready for the show circuit. 2 in February, 1 in March, Salute in April.
Salute's the big one, yeah.
That's the big one. On new products, I've got a whole bench load of stuff I'd like to get out. Soviet motorcyclists. I've got a new range of American figures. I've got the Winter Russians, Sherman tanks I need to get out. I've got some guys who want Shermans done for Marines, so I need to do the specialist Sherman tanks that the Marines use, and my half tracks, and changing a lot of the, as we've moved on from when we first started, half track, American half tracks. Resin bodies, metal tracks, metal wheels.
Right.
We've now moved to the manufacturing process on where we can offer one piece.
Right.
Wheels and tracks on the whole.
Which saves time for the gamer, where you don't necessarily want to make a big kit, but you want something that looks.
So cuts the metal out of the process. Expensive metal creates a different model. So going back over what we were already selling, turning them into one piece castings with our new technology. So there's loads to do, and one man band really, one manufacturing.
When you're self-employed, there's always something to do, and it's January, so don't forget you've got to put your accounts in as well.
Yeah, luckily I've done that. I got mine in before, and so.
And where can people find you online? You've got a
Battlezone Miniatures. Go Battlezone Miniatures, and we're there. We've been there a while. Obviously got a website, and then if you see us at shows, go from there.
Nice one. Thanks a lot, Stephen. Pleasure talking to you. Very interesting to see you behind the curtain.
Now you've got to edit that lot.